So, you know that feeling when you walk into a room right after two people have had just like a vicious screaming match?
Oh, yeah. You can instantly feel it.
Right. They might not be saying a single word when you cross the threshold, but the air in that room it's physically heavy. You can feel the tension vibrating in the space. It fundamentally alters the atmosphere.
Exactly. And we process that instinctively in the physical world. I mean, the environment itself absorbs the conflict. We recognize, we just intuitively know that words carry weight and leave a residue.
But the wild thing is, the moment we open our phones and scroll through our digital feeds, we completely drop that physical intuition. We just toss it out the window.
Yeah, we start treating words like they're just weightless data.
Right. We assume that because text on a screen doesn't, make a physical sound, it's just harmless air passing by. But ancient societies actually had incredibly strict frameworks built to prevent this exact kind of atmospheric pollution.
They absolutely did.
And our modern digital architecture, like the algorithms deciding what you see right now, is explicitly built to manufacture it. So that collision right between ancient moral discipline and modern technological design, that is the focus of our deep dive today.
It's a fascinating intersection.
We are looking at a really thought-provoking essay by Lev Nemotin. It's called Lashon Hara and the IQMQ filter. And our mission here is to explore how we might actually reclaim a livable, breathable human atmosphere online.
Which is, frankly, something we desperately need.
Yeah.
Because the essay tackles a massive blind spot in how we think about the internet. We tend to frame the problem of online toxicity purely as an issue of platform moderation.
Right, like when is the tech CEO going to finally step in and clean up the mess?
Exactly. But Nemotin introduces a radically different framework here. He bridges this ancient Jewish ethical concept regarding the profound danger of human speech with a highly technical, user-owned software layer that is currently in development.
It's a really serious look at how we get out of this mess. But to really grasp the tech solution Nemerton's team is building, we have to start with the ancient moral intuition that inspired it.
We do, yeah.
And that concept is called Lashon Hara. It completely upends our modern default assumptions about speech, especially our obsession with factual accuracy as the ultimate defense.
So, in Jewish ethical thought, Lashon Hara translates roughly to the evil tongue. It's a strict prohibition against harmful or degrading speech about another person.
Okay.
But the crucial distinction, and this is what most people miss, is that Lashon Hara specifically prohibits truthful but damaging speech.
Wait, truthful, because normally when we talk about dangerous speech, we're talking about lies, right?
Right, but we aren't talking about lies or libel or slander here. They're totally different categories for falsehoods. Lashon Hara is solely concerned with the weaponization of facts.
I mean, I have to push back on that a little bit. If we're talking about suppressing true statements, doesn't a society need hard truths to survive?
It does.
It just sounds like we're hiding bad facts in the name of kindness, which feels, I don't know, dangerous. Truth operates a lot like a surgeon's scalpel.
Oh, that's a good way to frame it.
Right, because it's incredibly sharp, and yes, it cuts. But a surgeon uses it to remove a tumor, to save a life. You need that sharp edge to heal a sick system.
Yeah.
Banning truthful statements just because they cause damage kind of feels like banning the scalpel.
Well, the scalpel is actually the perfect way to understand the mechanism of Lashon Hara, because the principle doesn't demand sentimental silence.
Okay.
You still have an absolute obligation to warn the community,
Right.
right, to protect the vulnerable, to expose genuine wrongdoing.
Uh-huh.
The scalpel remains on the table.
So you can still use it.
Yes. What Lashon Hara does is shift the moral presumption of the person holding the instrument. It recognizes that without intense internal discipline, people stop acting like surgeons and start swinging the truth around like a chainsaw.
Wow. Yeah, and a chainsaw doesn't heal. It just shreds everything in its path for the thrill of the destruction.
Exactly.
And we see that every single day. Someone finds a deeply embarrassing, entirely factual piece of information about a coworker or a public figure, and they broadcast it purely for the social currency of, being the one who dropped the bomb.
And that is the exact mechanism Lashon Hara interrupts.
Right.
It insists that human speech is not just a neutral transfer of data.
Right.
Speech is an action. It actively alters the reputational ecology of a community. Because human beings live in these incredibly fragile networks of trust, and our dignity exists publicly in the minds of others.
That's a heavy thought. Our dignity exists in the minds of others.
It does. So when you expose someone's private imperfection merely for entertainment or spite, even if your statement is 100% factually correct, you have committed a profound moral failure. A society can be completely flooded with technically correct facts and still become morally suffocated if truth is stripped of restraint.
So just think about your own digital feed this morning. Think about how much of the content pushed to the top of your timeline relies on that exact dynamic.
A lot of it.
Most of it. And if Lashon Hara was designed to protect the fragile reputational ecology of a physical village, we really have to ask what happens to that human fragility when it meets the machinery of the modern internet.
Well, it gets amplified.
Yeah, because the algorithmic architecture of our platforms, it doesn't just tolerate the chainsaw, it runs on an assembly line designed to mass produce them.
The shift in scale fundamentally changes the nature of the harm. Like, the human appetite for gossip and degradation, that's always existed. The village marketplace definitely had its share of cruelty,
Sure.
but the digital age industrialized it. A passing cruelty in a physical village eventually fades away. On the internet, it becomes a permanent, searchable trend.
We use the phrase stylized humiliation to describe this.
Yeah.
It's the 10-second video, perfectly edited to dunk on a stranger's awkward moment, set to trending music, and blasted out to millions of people.
Because the platforms are financially incentivized to prioritize valence and arousal, meaning they actively look for content that triggers a high-emotion, deeply reactive state.
And outrage and performative aggression are just the most reliable triggers for that state.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really critical realization about the nature of our digital environment. The modern social media feed is not a neutral chronological list of information.
It hasn't been for a long time.
No, it is an engineered ordering of reality. It trains the user through repetition. By constantly surfacing moral asymmetry and stylized humiliation, the algorithm actually normalizes that behavior.
It teaches you that this is just how we interact now.
Right. By prominence and sequence, it teaches you that degradation is just the standard currency of public interaction.
But people love to fall back on that old defense, right? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. We culturally defend this behavior by insisting that speech is just harmless expression.
But it's not.
No. If speech is an action that shapes the environment, like Lashon Hara suggests, then scrolling through an outrage-optimized feed isn't just passively reading. It's like dropping a single drop of ink into a glass of water. It changes the whole glass. And at digital scale, we are basically all just swimming in ink.
That sticks and stones defense completely collapses when you examine the cognitive toll of this environment. You aren't just observing a toxic interaction. The platform is using that interaction to calibrate your baseline expectations for human behavior.
Wow.
Yeah. When millions of people are simultaneously trained to view gratuitous cruelty as normal, the shared moral atmosphere degrades.
And if the platform algorithms are actively financially incentivized to keep pumping this toxic ink into the water, we clearly cannot rely on the tech giants to clean it up.
Definitely not.
So the friction has to be introduced somewhere else. The solution has to happen at the tap, basically, on the user's end. And this is where Moten's essay pivots from ancient philosophy to contemporary systems design.
Right, with the introduction of the IQMQ filter.
Let's get into that. What exactly is this filter?
So the IQMQ project is an operational response to the collapse of our digital reputational ecology. It's an adaptive middleware layer.
Middleware meaning it sits in the middle.
Exactly. Functionally, it sits right between the platform's raw output, say the API feed from X, or a decentralized network like Nostr in your personal screen.
Okay.
So before a piece of content even reaches your eyeballs, this user-owned layer evaluates the public expression on two distinct axes, the cognitive quotient, or IQ, and the moral quotient, or MQ.
Okay, so when you hear the term IQ, the immediate thought is like a psychometric intelligence test, like an IQ test. But that isn't what the system is parsing here, right?
No, not at all. The cognitive quotient in this context is an index of the structural quality of public reasoning. It evaluates clarity, coherence, and how evidence is handled.
That makes sense.
Software models today, particularly advanced natural language processing systems, they are highly capable of mapping the logical structure of an argument. The IQ axis doesn't judge whether an opinion is right or wrong.
Oh, that's key. It's not fact-checking the ideology.
Right. It assesses whether the text actually supports its own claims. Does it rely on wild leaps of logic? Is it intentionally obscure or pseudo-rigorous? Because public discourse is frequently flooded with content that isn't necessarily cruel, but is cognitively empty.
Right. It degrades the public space simply by adding noise.
Exactly.
So I get that from a structural standpoint. Evaluating logic is a relatively straightforward computational task for modern AI, But how does software actually measure a moral quotient? That sounds incredibly subjective. I mean, the idea of an algorithm parsing morality triggers immediate alarm bells for me.
And it should.
Yeah.
But the key here is that the MQ axis is not attempting to judge a user's soul or their ultimate human worth or their political ideology.
Okay, so what is it looking at?
It focuses strictly on observable structural patterns of public behavior. It evaluates the method of disagreement, truth orientation, and the relationship to harm.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. So for instance, the system looks for manipulative omission, like presenting a selectively edited quote to completely invert someone's meaning.
Oh, wow.
Or it scans for gleeful degradation, where the language shifts from critiquing an idea to systematically dehumanizing the speaker.
Okay, so it's looking for the linguistic markers of the chainsaw.
Yes.
So if a post is highly articulate and statistically dense meaning, it scores a high cognitive quotient, a high IQ, but it uses all of that pristine logic to subtly dehumanize a vulnerable group, the filter flags the structural cruelty and assigns a low moral quotient.
Exactly. And conversely, you could have a post that is entirely well-meaning and kind. So a high MQ, but completely factually incoherent, scoring a low IQ.
Right.
The system maps these two variables to understand the true nature of the expression. But the intervention mechanism is where the project truly separates itself from traditional platform moderation.
This is the really important part.
It is. Because the IQ-MQ filter does not delete contents from the internet. It does not wipe data from the servers or ban users from the network. It manages salience.
Let's drill down into that mechanism because it's vital. I kind of think of this filter functioning like a pair of highly advanced, smart noise-canceling headphones.
That's a great analogy.
Because, noise-canceling headphones do not delete the jet engine running outside your airplane window.
Yeah.
The physical noise still exists in the world.
Right.
What the headphones do is utilize microphones to listen to the frequency of the drone, and then they generate an exact inverse sound wave. The two waves collide and neutralize each other right before they hit your eardrum. It's called phase cancellation.
That physical mechanism maps perfectly to what the IQ-MQ software does to your digital feed. The software acts as the active phase cancellation for algorithmic toxicity.
So how does it actually look on my screen?
Well, if a piece of content is flagged as highly degrading and cognitively weak, the filter attenuates it. It introduces friction. It might push the content down in your sequence or collapse the text or require you to explicitly click a button acknowledging that you want to view low MQ content.
So it intercepts the algorithm's attempt to force-feed you the outrage. It neutralizes the prominence of that post before it hits your psychological eardrum.
Exactly.
And you can still take the headphones off if you want to hear the noise. The content is there. But the platform no longer dictates the acoustic environment of your mind.
It manages passage and delay. Because right now, the digital platforms use friction against you. They make it incredibly easy to view endless hostility and very difficult to curate a calm feed.
Yeah, that's so true.
The IQ-MQ layer reverses that dynamic. It restores friction to the consumption of degradation.
So having mapped both the ancient law of Lashon Hara and the modern architecture of this filter, we really start to see how they intersect. They are attempting to interrupt the exact same human vulnerability, just at different points in the information river.
Right? Upstream versus downstream.
Yeah. Lashon Hara operates inwardly. It is the intense discipline of the speaker. It places the friction upstream at the source, demanding that you ask, should I say this, before the words are released into the physical room.
It relies entirely on conscience and moral self-command.
And the IQ-MQ filter, by contrast, operates outwardly. It sits on the receiver's end at the mouth of the river, asking, should this become central in what I'm repeatedly shown?
Exactly.
But I look at a tool that filters moral speech on the receiver's end, and a real concern surfaces for me. Are we essentially outsourcing our morality to an API?
How do you mean?
Well, if Lashon Hara is the discipline of biting your tongue and the filter is wearing the noise-canceling headphones, does relying on the headphones mean we are giving up on the human capacity for moral self-command? Like, if I never have to deal with the noise, I never build the internal resilience to process it.
I see what you're saying, but waiting for universal self-discipline in an environment that is mathematically designed to reward impulse is a losing battle.
Fair point.
The essay argues that we aren't abandoning self-command. We are adapting our defenses to the sheer scale of the attack. Lashon Hara assumes a human-scaled world, a physical village where social pressure can actually encourage a speaker to master their tongue.
Right, you can shame the village gossip into silence.
Yeah.
But you cannot shame a bot farm or, an engagement farming influencer who gets paid per click.
Exactly the problem. The informational field is now shaped by automated systems that systematically promote the most reckless actors. A personal ethic of restraint simply cannot compete with a planetary-scale algorithm optimizing for outrage.
It's totally outmatched.
It is. So the filter doesn't replace ethics. It creates a new site where ethics can actually function. It gives the user the agency to secure their own informational border. By restoring that boundary, it creates the quiet space necessary for genuine moral reflection to occur.
That makes a lot of sense. So both systems, ancient and modern, share a striking kinship of intent. They both violently reject the modern assumption that truth alone is a sufficient justification for speech. And they both seek to insert a moment of friction before momentum takes over. But, reading through Moten's essay, anytime someone proposes a system to evaluate the moral quality of human expression, my immediate thought goes to authoritarianism, like who gets to define what is fair?
And the author is hyper-aware of that danger. Any system classifying human expression will inevitably drift towards censorship or ideological capture if it isn't strictly bounded.
Right.
That is why the implementation of the IQMQ filter is governed by a series of uncompromising safeguards.
So reading through those safeguards, the one that struck me immediately is the requirement that the system remains entirely non-coercive. It is strictly a navigational instrument for the individual user.
Right, it's a compass, not a cage.
Exactly. It cannot be tied to a social credit score, it cannot affect your civic standing, and it cannot interact with your banking or legal rights. But how does a system using complex pattern recognition and NLP models remain transparent to the everyday user? If the logic is hidden in a black box, it just becomes another opaque algorithm controlling what we see.
And transparency is the second critical safeguard. It addresses that exact issue through inspectable routing.
How does that work?
If the filter attenuates a post, the user must be able to see the specific logical pathway the software used to make that decision. There must be an accessible UI element, like a toggle or a drop-down, that displays the structural weights.
Okay.
It showed you this post was flagged because it utilized a known pattern of manipulative omission, scoring a low MQ. The logic is laid completely bare.
Oh, that's huge. So you aren't just told the post is bad, you are shown the mathematical breakdown of its structural hostility.
Yes, and if the system gets it wrong, there are correction pathways for the user to override the filter,
Right.
which actually trains the personal model to better align with the user's nuanced understanding of context.
That's fascinating.
Furthermore, the system evaluates expression contextually and over time. It looks at behavioral patterns. It doesn't isolate a single out-of-context fragment from a decade ago to mathematically condemn someone. It looks at the ongoing structural quality of the discourse.
But the ultimate safeguard, of course, is that the system is entirely voluntary and user-owned. It is not a top-down mandate imposed by a tech billionaire or a government agency deciding what the public is allowed to see.
No, you hold the controls.
You calibrate the headphones, and it naturally resists ideological capture because it grounds its evaluations in the structural dimensions of public conduct, like whether evidence is handled fairly, or rather than enforcing conformity to a specific political agenda.
Exactly. It is morally modest. It doesn't want to judge your soul. It just wants to turn down the volume on the chainsaw.
Right. It's about structural hygiene, not ideological purity. So when we synthesize this entire journey, from the ancient speech ethics of the village to the bleeding edge of API-driven middleware, the ultimate goal emerges really clearly. Neither Lashon Hara nor the IQMQ filter is trying to build some utopian monastery where everyone whispers politely and no one ever profoundly disagrees.
Right, because a society without friction is intellectually stagnant.
We absolutely need friction. We need forceful, passionate debate to test our ideas and expose bad policies. But we need a breathable public space to do it in.
Yes.
A place where you have absolute agency over your informational intake. You should be able to fiercely debate an opponent without being subjected to gratuitous, algorithmically engineered degradation. You should be able to disagree without destroying the reputational ecology of the community.
By elevating the threshold at which speech is released inwardly and giving people control over what they absorb outwardly, public disagreement regains its structure. We finally separate urgency from manipulation. We separate the healing cut of the scalpel from the blind destruction of the chainsaw.
It brings us right back to the room with the heavy air. We have collectively accepted this illusion that the air online simply has to be toxic, that swimming in industrialized hostility is just the price of admission for using the internet. But we don't have to accept that. We can open a window. We can build a filter.
We have the tools.
We really do. We have tools, both ancient moral frameworks demanding internal discipline and modern technological layers providing external defense to fundamentally change the atmosphere. However, as we wrap up this deep dive into Nemoten's vision, there is a slightly uncomfortable reality that we have to address.
Yeah, there is.
It's a reality the essay forces us to confront, and it's something you need to deeply consider the next time you open your phone and start scrolling through your timeline. If tomorrow you were handed the absolute perfect controls to the IQMQ filter, if you possessed the immediate technological power to completely phase cancel all the moral and cognitive degradation, all the cheap shots, and all the stylized cruelty from your daily feed, are you prepared to confront how much of your daily digital entertainment is secretly fueled by the exact same cruelty you claim to hate? Do we actually want to breathe clean air? Or have we just learned to love the toxicity? Think about it.